Welcome to Our Community. Susie Thomas visiting with Jim Morris. He is from Hear Inc. Good morning.
Good morning.
And we're hearing all about hearing loss. First of all, Jim, what is the problem in America right now? How are we doing as Americans with hearing and hearing loss?
Not too well, all in all. We still provide loud toys to our infant children. For instance, I bought a truck for my grandson, and I measured the output, and it was at 115, 120 decibels, depending upon where you were. With little arms, those are right next to them, and they like to be close. So we don't think about it even from the youth standpoint, and that's really where the problem is that we don't think about hearing. The damage happens early in life, but the effect of the damage sets in later in life.
Is it beginning to affect earlier in life? I'm thinking of young people standing right up in front of the TV and cranking it up pretty high. I'm thinking of all the screen time that they have and all of the electronics that are so loud, as you say. And I'm thinking of those iPods with the little earbuds in their ears starting very young.
Somewhere around, and I can't be real precise on this number, but around 20 to 25% of grade school children already have some type of hearing loss. And by the time they get into high school, we know that more than 20% have a hearing loss. So we don't even measure it going into college. We just know that in the college years that there's probably even more. So people that are young, who are just starting to engage in their life, are already suffering because they have a hearing loss, and it affects them in the workplace.
Okay, and what you're telling me is this is not hearing loss that they were born with. This was not a genetic condition. This was something that they were born with normal hearing and through different activities and so forth developed this kind of hearing loss before entering kindergarten?
For the most part, that's true.
Wow.
Now, some of those are measured with either a congenital or some other type of birth hearing loss that they had shortly after or formed in the womb. But most of those are having that hearing loss because it was induced through noise.
I'm going to guess baby boomers are pretty bad as far as hearing loss. They invented rock and roll. We invented rock and roll.
Bruce Springsteen was wonderful, but he killed a lot of hearing out there, as did most of those concerts.
Yes, guilty. But so how are we as baby boomers? How are we doing with our hearing?
For baby boomers, about 1 in 6 baby boomers have a hearing loss. And that's a pretty significant number. If you think about it, baby boomers right now, most of them are still working, earning a living. And we know that for every 10 decibels of hearing loss, there's been a study done, and it's getting a little old, so it's probably more now as far as the impact. But for those that have a hearing loss, let me rephrase this. I got to think of this. What happens is for every 10 decibels, they have $2,250 worth of lost income. Really? I can tell you that for most hearing loss, we're not even fitting people with hearing aids until we're seeing about 50 decibels of across the board hearing loss. So you're talking about $12,000 to $15,000 of lost income potential. And the study wasn't a small study. They selected from around 60,000 families across America.
Is that over a lifetime or per year annually?
No, that's the interesting part, is the study was a static study. They took somebody working at, let's say, Diebold as a secretary, and then they took somebody at Timken, and then they took somebody as a manager at maybe a company like Diebold and a manager at Timken. But in different states and across the country, they did this survey. And then they would choose a person with a hearing loss and a person without hearing loss. And they documented that there was that much income loss. Now, that was kind of a curious and eye-opening study, but what really is the eye-opener is, where are those people going to be 10 years from now?
Yes.
Because most managers don't think when somebody doesn't get something, they don't bother to think, well, could it be from hearing loss? They just assume that the person isn't paying attention or isn't bright enough to get it or doesn't care.
Is that, because I was trying to think what could possibly be the cause and effect there. But yes, if you're in a meeting and you're not hearing what's going on and you don't answer correctly when called upon, then you don't look like you're with it much, do you?
Either that's for sure, and the other one side of it is If a person is given a task to do in a team and they're going their separate ways and you come back 2 weeks later and your key part isn't done or it's done inappropriately because you didn't hear it right, then there are consequences for that.
That's
and it's
not
usually
insubordination. That is you just didn't hear it.
Didn't get it.
Wow.
Yep.
What is a dangerous decibel level? What should we aim for? What's okay and what's not okay?
Here, a general rule, and you almost need to write it down to remember it, but anything over 85 decibels is considered potential to damaging hearing. And 85 is what OSHA uses for an 8-hour day. However, for every 3 decibels that you go over that, you've got to cut that in half.
Whoa.
So at 88 decibels, you're down to 4 hours. At 91, you're down to 2. Well, by the time you get up to 110 decibels, you're only able to be in there for minutes. When you think of something like a shotgun blast or anything that's an explosion type, then that's almost immediate damage.
How do we measure decibels? Most of us don't have a little machine that we would have in our home. How do you know what's too loud?
In general, what I can tell you is that our speaking voices are right around 60 to 65 decibels. Our yelling voice is right around 85, and some people a little louder and some a little less. Babies crying in a nursery are going to be crying at greater than 90 decibels. So prime candidates for hearing help are those nurses that are working in the nursery.
Young mothers.
And young moms. You bet.
What kinds of hearing loss are there?
There are 3 major categories of hearing loss. One is sensory neural, which is doing damage to the cochlea, which is the pickup nerve center for hearing loss. The other one is conductive, and that the conductive pathway, if you would think of it, is the pathway for sound to get to the cochlea. So that would be the outer ear, the ear canal, the eardrum, if there were a hole in it, or if it was sclerotic or leathery, or beyond there is what we call the ossicles, the hammer, the anvil, the stirrup. We know them by different names, but they're the same components. Something like you could get otosclerosis type of a buildup on that. So people with other rheumatoid arthritis type of problems will have a higher likelihood to have that conductive loss. And then there's the third category is a combined one.
Okay.
So somebody that maybe has a hole in their eardrum and they have a sensory neural loss. They're additive.
Contraband in our home growing up was Q-tips.
Yes.
That was completely illegal under our roof.
And it should be.
Okay, my father always said, don't put anything in your ear smaller than your elbow. That was his cardinal rule. Okay, let's talk about Q-tips. So why? Why should that be? What's dangerous about that?
Most people are not going to put a Q-tip in beyond where it's going to hurt them because there's a nerve that goes through, there's a nerve that goes through the ear that's called the vagus nerve. It goes right down through the center of the ear canal. Its precise location varies person to person. When you put anything over that nerve that moves, it's going to drive you nuts. Okay. It's the nerve that God gave you so that if a bug gets in your ear, you start trying to get it out of there.
Yes.
So most people won't, but you can if somebody bumps you or you make a slip and fall and try to catch yourself. You could drive that into your eardrum and potentially cause some problems. The biggest problem with Q-tips is people think they're cleaning wax out and they look at the Q-tip and they see wax on it, but what they don't account for is that they're pushing just a little bit of wax every time in front of that, and they eventually create a blockage of wax, and then you're not going to hear.
Well, how do we clean our ears safely?
There are products on the market. One of them is Debrox. Another one is Murade. You put it in your ear, and it's a peroxide-type product, and it is a little stronger than peroxide. And it has an oil base, and it will bubble and soften that wax. It will make it come up out of the ear. And then what you do is you want to rinse the ear with a syringe. And the rinsing part is actually as important, if not more important, than the just loosening it up because it washes that debris out of there. If you don't do that, it's just going to get hard again. Then after that, what I recommend people do is we actually give them a little class on how to do that, is that take that same syringe with air in it and just blow air in the ear so that you blow that water back out of there too.
Mm-hmm. Ear candles. Do you know what I'm talking about? From health food stores, do they work, or is that quackery?
Well, I'm not going to say quackery.
Okay.
I'm just going to say if you're in the world of hearing care as a professional or an audiologist, you're going to just put the nix-nay sign up to that.
Okay.
I did know a homeopathic person who for years had been candling, and she said, you probably are not going to think very highly of me because I do ear candling. And I said, really, I have not any direct empirical data for ear candling.
Okay.
But I would really love to do that with you.
Did you ever?
Oh, yes, we did. I said, you find me a candidate that has earwax that you can candle. We'll bring them into our office, and we'll take a video otoscopic picture of their ear canal and the wax. Then you can do the ear candling, and we'll do another picture afterwards. Well, we ended up with 2 people the same day. One had very soft yellow wax, and the other person had very hard brown wax.
Okay.
And so that meant we had 4 ears to candle.
Yes.
And after we candled them, we opened up the candles, and they had all of the same kind of a grayish product in there, tannish gray product, more tannish. But it was all the same amount.
Really?
So,
so it was from the candle, not from the ear.
It was from the candle. And if you think about the variation in the ears, it's going to be very hard to get a good seal in there with those candles. And that's where a lot of damage can be done. We're talking about fire could be hazardous. Yes, it could. But the real damage could be done by sticking that candle in the ear and abrading the ear canal, which can cause bleeding. It'll open it up to infection.
Oh, my.
But we took the people down. We looked in their ear afterwards, and all we saw was a white film. So what it was the smoke from the candle was going down in there, and it was collecting on the wax in the ear canal.
Oh, my.
And then we kind of cleaned that off, and it still showed the wax, and then we had to remove the wax with our instruments, and all the wax was still there. So it did a good job of preserving and hiding the earwax.
Okay.
But the heat of the candle can soften it enough that you'll get some sound through. But after a little while, it's just going to close back up again.
Okay. We know that, don't put things in your ear.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yep.
What are some other risk factors of hearing loss?
Risk factors of hearing loss, there's just a lot of them. It goes from, it's a safety concern. One of the safety concerns is if I hear a car squealing its tires, revving its engine, coming down the street, I have a response time available to me. A person with a hearing loss could have a third or less than half of that response time, which would mean they might step out of the street and hurt themselves trying to get back or get hit. We actually had a patient that was leaving our office in an office that we had, and there was a sloping sidewalk coming down the area between businesses, and kids used to like to ride skateboards on that.
Sure.
We had to be really careful because you could hear that in our office. You could hear kind of the thump as the wheels were going over the cracks of the sidewalk. People with a hearing loss couldn't hear that. They would walk out and almost have a collision with these kids with skateboards.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So that's just one of them. Yeah.
Right. The obvious.
Yeah.
The thought that, of course, if you can't hear, then we're not as aware of our surroundings, and that can be dangerous.
Another one is driving.
Of course.
That we need all of our senses. They augment each other. If you're driving and you go to an unmarked railroad crossing and you don't hear the train coming and your windows are up and you have maybe the radio on, chances are that you're going to have a lot close call than you would if you had normal hearing.
Well, and isn't that something? I mean, we always tell the kids, no radio when they first learn to drive, because you need to be able to hear those trains or other traffic or so forth, people, etc. We need to take a short break. We'll be back after these words. We're visiting with Jim Morris from Hear Inc., and you're listening to Our Community.